When severe weather is at its worst, look for calm during the storm.
Things are quieting down. It's not going to be around too much longer.
The Storm 5 HD weather team. There's no safer place in a storm. What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the News Channel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello everyone, welcome to Issues of Faith. I am Ben Hall. We are talking today about the church and the immigrant community. And we're very happy, actually honored to have with us Father Joseph Breen, the longtime pastor out at St. Edward's Catholic Church. Thank you, Father Breen, for being with us.
Pleasure to be with you.
So we're going to talk about all kinds of things, certainly what you've been doing since you retired, but you recently gave a speech out at Vanderbilt about the church and the immigrant community. What was the focus of the speech? Certainly at St. Edward's you dealt with that community a lot. Kind of walk us through the focus of your speech there.
I gave a presentation on what you might say drives people to leave their own countries and go sometimes thousands of miles away. Dangerous situations, and it's usually either one of maybe four different things: hunger, very poor economy, persecutions, war. They're the most three common reasons why people will go and put their lives in danger to seek something better. And that is very true with our relationship in the United States with immigrants, whether it was the wars that they had in Europe, the Holocaust, the number of Jews that became immigrants.
Well, there's always been this tension, right, between this new group of people coming in.
Always. Now that's another thing that is common. What is common is when they get there, they were persecuted. They had a hard time. Many times the kids couldn't go to school. The father had a very hard time finding a job. You had signs that Jews need not respond, or Catholics. Same way with they had with blacks for a long time. So that's another thing common. Wherever they go, they have a hard time being received.
And the title of your speech was Welcoming the Stranger. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like we do a good job, churches do a good job of welcoming the immigrant community here in Nashville?
We're doing better. We got a lot to be proud of. We really do. I remember when I was a teenager, you were either black or white, and you were either Jewish or Christian. That was it. And now we have people from over 102 countries here in Davidson County. 102 countries. You have kids, students out at Glen Cliff High School that speak 27 different languages. You see what a challenge it is for the teachers. And I always think that we need to educate the people better, because they say all teachers must have the same, you might say, results, the grade scores. But if you're here and you're in a school where they speak that many languages, and many of their fathers have been deported, that unfortunate program that we had with the sheriff program, right. That unfortunately in the beginning it was told that no one would be deported except those that had criminal records. That was the reason, and that's what they said would be the focus. But no, we deported over 8,000 men, and many of them for traffic violations. And that left a wife, a mother, or 2 or 3 children. Most people are not aware of how painful, how difficult it was for a child to go to school and not knowing whether his father was going to be there that night, being taken up, deported, and maybe it would be a week or so before they know where that father was. And all that suffering, they discarded that program, you might know, maybe several months ago. never should have been really operating. We've had good leadership from our governors, from our local mayors, from the chamber, from many nonprofits, many churches and synagogues. We've had great leadership welcoming the stranger. And it is in the Old Testament, I think Micah, that says pretty much welcome the stranger, for you were, in the beginning you were a stranger, talking about the Jewish people. So we're doing very well.
At the same time, do you still feel like Nashville is a segregated community? And even maybe more segregated than other cities, or do you feel like that's not the case?
I think we're one of the more progressive because of that leadership. We have the universities here that I think are very influential. We've had the Tennessean all these many years that have been, if you want to use the word liberal, progressive, being complimentary. That goes back to the integration of the 50s and 60s especially. So we've had good leadership and we work together. And why did the president come here?
Right, that's right.
That was a real compliment to our government, to our educators, and to the leadership, that he came here because Nashville was welcoming the stranger. And we have, as I say, people from over 102 countries. And for the most part, they get along well. The Muslims and the Jews have worked hard to get to know each other. Sitting down with the people who are different, that's how you come to like somebody. And then you come to like that person to the point, and then just say, you know, when I was so ignorant about who you were, I had such negative attitudes.
How much does that happen, the mixing of people getting together to know another religion? Because so often people go to their church and that's all they know, and they don't get to know another religion. Do you think that is done enough? There are enough opportunities for that, or people take advantage of those opportunities? You know, how much getting to know each other is really happening when it comes to different religions?
I'm really happy with the fact that many of the religions have become more open, more, let's say, those that are Christian, what I would say more Christ-like. I think two men, in addition to others, need to be praised. What Bob Fisher has done at Belmont University to welcome the immigrants, to have programs to help them get education. Used to be rather exclusive, and now it is very, very inclusive. I really am proud of what the president of David Livingston has done. They used to be very exclusive, and now very inclusive. What they've done for veterans from the military to come back and get cheap tuition, get a good education. What they've done to welcome the stranger, the Hispanics. And I think we can be proud of that leadership, because that not only took intelligence to do what those two men had done, but a great deal of courage. And this is what I think the chamber, the universities, all kinds of groups of men and women who are dedicated to justice. You know, the Jewish people have been outstanding throughout their history, mainly because they were slaves in Egypt and so forth. The rabbis over the past 30 or 40 years have been the leaders in the 60s for integration, and they are also that way with the immigrants population.
You were the priest at St. Edward's for 31 years. You led that congregation for 31 years, and you recently retired. When you started, when you began your career there 31 years ago, or began your time there, what was the immigrant makeup of that church, and what was it when you ended?
Well, in the beginning, there were very few, but we were able to offer our facilities to the Hispanics, regardless of what their religion was. That was the start of, let's say, the Hispanics Chamber of Commerce. It was the start of a number of those different groups because they could meet there freely in the sense it didn't cost them anything. That was the beginning of the great, you might say, influx of Hispanics. Over the years, they got greater and greater. We were very fortunate. You had a very outstanding minister up on Old Shore Road. Used to have one of the larger Baptist populations. Name was Reverend Paul Durham. He was a good minister. He was an entrepreneur. He was also engaged in politics, head of the Parking Commission. He was a man of many talents. He was a dear, dear friend. And he had Radnor Baptist Church. And he died, fell over after he preached. And after 4 years of trying to salvage everything, he had 2 sons. And they had a school, pre-K through 12. They did have a large population at church, but you had the change in demographics. And many of their people moved out, further out. More Hispanics moved in. So after 4 years, the son came down and said, did we want to buy the property, the whole thing? Well, after a while, we did. And we established the first Catholic Hispanic parish church. We don't know of any in the Southeast that are totally Hispanic Catholic parishes. They operate just like, let's say, St. Everett's, Christ the King, St. Henry's, and that's one of the very few that are throughout the Southeast. They determine whatever they like, mass schedules and weddings and so forth. That's something that we can be very, very proud of.
All right, we have to take a break, and I want to come back and ask about, was there friction as this happened, this transition within your church, and how did you deal with it? But we'll take a break. We'll be back with more Issues of Faith right after this.
Information leader.
Welcome back to Issues of Faith. We are talking with Father Joseph Breen, the longtime pastor, now retired at St. Edward's Catholic Church. So we went to break. We're talking about how your church was really one of the most diverse, and probably certainly one of the most diverse in our area, probably in the whole country. I wanted to get at, how did that transition, because it wasn't diverse when you started 31 years ago, then it became one of the most diverse at the time you left. Was it a rocky transition? Was there conflict? Was there tension? And how did you deal with it?
It was a challenge in the beginning. I was educated as a Vatican II priest under John the 23rd. He called the Ecumenical Council. It met for 4 years. I was in Rome at that time. I did my 4 years of theological studies. I got there in end of September 1958. Pope Pius, who had been Pope for 20 some odd years, died, and we had on the 23rd. Oh, he was a great man, and he is pretty much quite similar to Pope Francis. He seeks the truth and knows that no one never fully, you might say, has the fullness of truth. He knew that we had rules and regulations that were negative. It caused people to leave the church. He wanted to open the windows to get fresh air and make changes. And over a period of 4 years, what a blessing the Vatican Council was. So it was being implemented for about 5 or 6 years. Then we had a different pope, and the Curia took over. The Roman Curia reversed everything of Vatican II for the most part. And we went back to the pre-1960s, where obedience, you don't question. the church has all the answers. And so we lost a lot of Catholics during that period. We lost many in 68 when the Pope repeated the teaching on birth control, where everybody was ready to accept the fact that birth control was a responsible part of parenthood. But unfortunately, and a number of people say due to the influence of the Roman Curia, he did not change it, and that was very painful throughout the world. Some sociologists would say we lost maybe a third of our Catholics. And
wow.
So now Pope Francis was elected for two reasons: to reform the Roman Curia, the cardinals in Rome that have controlled the church totally. They exercise the leadership not based upon respect, intelligence, and freedom, but on total obedience. Otherwise, you could lose your episcopacy as a bishop if you spoke out on any of those issues. And the second reason Pope Francis was elected was to implement Vatican II. He has quite a job, because many of those bishops were elected in a very conservative time. And I think it was common knowledge that a number of those men that were made bishops, they were made bishops not what they knew, what they had done, but mainly whom they knew. And so we got some bishops that never should have been made bishops. And they're the ones that really would be in opposition to the Pope Francis.
You certainly haven't been afraid to speak your mind and question authority within the church. And that's gotten you in trouble a little bit over the course of your career. Can you talk about that? You were reprimanded 3 times. How did that make you feel, and how did that happen?
I proclaimed the teaching of Vatican II. I mean, I believed in it. It made sense. Freedom of conscience. A greater understanding of what's right and wrong. The Roman Curia possessed an attitude that we have the fullness of truth. We don't need to debate it or discuss any changes. So unfortunately, the bishops were under that relationship of fear. They couldn't speak out on any of those issues. What issues? Married priests, ordination of women, contraception, infallibility. They weren't even able to speak out on those issues when they went to the meetings. I was trained in Rome, and in those seminars, the first 5 years, I went to places like Georgetown, Catholic University, Seton Hall.
So you weren't afraid to speak out on those issues?
Well, I became so, I mean, it was the truth. It was whatever was right. And they started changing them and stressing obedience. And back to the previous, the 1960s. I understand why the 3 different bishops reprimanded me. They had no choice. They were in obedience to the Roman Curia, and if they didn't do what the Curia said, they could lose their episcopacy. I understood that. And so I really, in some ways, can't blame those bishops. But now Pope Francis is saying just what we Vatican II priests and most of the Catholic lay people. What's the largest Christian church in America? Roman Catholic. What's the second largest Christian group? 30 million fallen away Catholics. And in my years as a priest, I've never heard a bishop or cardinal or pope ever said anything about those 30 million. That's just in America. Pope Francis says that's a scandal. 30 million fallen away Catholics, we've done nothing for them. We're here to reconcile. We need to be a field hospital. We need to be out there bringing them back to the church. Jesus' main mission was what? To reconcile all of us to his Heavenly Father by his suffering and death.
So in our final moments, I mean, as someone who has not been afraid to speak out when he sees problems within the church, where do you see the church going? How optimistic are you about the future? Do you think it is a new day, or where do you see the church going?
Oh, I think we at Vatican II, and so many of the Catholic lay people, they're educated. What has happened in the last 50 years. Vatican Council was over with in 1965. It's now 2015. You know, that's 50 years. And many of our Catholic laity are well educated, more so than many of the priests that are now being ordained.
Do you think there'll be some of these changes, you know, married priests, or some of these divisive issues?
Well, let's look at it this way. The past many years, the bishops of America have condemned homosexuality and same-sex marriage. What has happened in the last 2 years about, let's say, same-sex marriage? Instead of being a minority of Americans who support it, within 2 years, it's a great majority now that support it. And I think one reason it has changed is that the mothers and the fathers of these gay people, they come to recognize that this is my son. He's a wonderful son or a beautiful daughter, and just because they have a different orientation, I'm not going to deny them. I've come to know that they love me and take better care of me than my son who is not gay. So the parents are the ones who have really organized and have changed the attitude, and basically we're more Christian.
You feel like that's more, and we're evolving.
Definite. And
that's going to be okay for the Catholic Church.
Definite. We have to, because if we don't get married priests, we're never going to have the quantity or the quality that we need to be a church with great leadership.
All right, this is fascinating. We could talk to you for a long time. Unfortunately, we're out of time, which I hate, but thank you for being with us. Thank you so much, Father Joseph Breen. It's a real pleasure. Father Joseph Breen. Thank you for watching Issues of Faith. Have a great day, everybody.
YouTube free.